Hello, everyone. I'm Anna Serrano, and I'm the President and Vice Chancellor of OCAD University.
Your position at OCAD is relatively new. You started that position early in 2020. What has this experience been like, starting a normal year and then being thrust into a pandemic?
Well, the reality, Amber, is even more scary because I assumed formally the position on July 1st. So that would have been, like smack dab in the middle of the pandemic. Now, the good thing is that Sarah Diamond, former president, and the board were obviously quite generous with me in terms of letting me be part of the decision making way in advance of July 1st, because we had to quickly mobilize and figure out what we were going to do for the fall as soon as we got into the pandemic, which was literally, end of March, beginning of April. And so it's been a whirlwind, essentially. But at the same time, I've been very, very impressed with how the faculty, administration, and staff took on the challenge of developing a learning experience in a completely new way, knowing that health and safety had to be our top priority for everyone, while at the same time delivering a quality education and community experience at a distance.
I think it's worth stepping back for a second in terms of understanding what OCAD does. If you're local, you understand, but for our audience members who perhaps aren't, what is OCAD all about?
So OCAD University is Canada's largest art, design, and media university. It's also the oldest. So it's a university that's essentially teaching the next generation of artists and designers, thinkers, strategists. So although we are about art and design, we're also about how art and design applies to a variety of sectors. So we have a health design, a design for health master's degree. We have a strategic foresight master's degree that looks at how you think about future scenarios. We obviously also look at a number of how digital futures and how we use digital technologies to not only create artistic experiences, but to understand how technology is going to help us make meaning out of the world and how we use technology to create meaning out of the world. Now, the thing that's important to note vis-a-vis the context we're in, and is obviously it's also about embodied learning, right? It's about making things with your hands. So part of the challenge that we have at OCAD at a time where a lot of the learning is happening online is how do you deliver a studio-based experience, a making with your body experience using technologies as well.
So how do you do that? I mean, what have you learned? I know it's early days, but what have you learned so far?
So one of the great things about working with the professors we have at OCAD is they really took on the challenge of how to help students make sense out of the pandemic. So our Ada Slate Chair of Drawing and Painting, Dr. Eileen Slova, had this amazing course that really looked at art in the time of COVID. And so she allowed, not even just allowed, but she worked with her students to use the expression of drawing and painting to help them exercise their anxieties and their thoughts and feelings about what the pandemic meant to them. And so the result was a tremendous amount of really incredible work, analog and digital work, that helped people understand what they were going through. And I think one of the ways in which you can do that is you allow people to see their present context, their everyday space as a studio, and not just assume that a studio is this like, well, not pristine, but this kind of like rarefied environment where you've got the right context to paint in, right? Any context where you're trying to make meaning out of the world is the right context to express yourself in.
You know, you bring up a really good point, and I wanted to also share a quote that you said recently about the transformative leadership of artists, designers, and cultural critics, and why this is more important now than ever. Why do you think that is?
Well, we just heard the throne speech, for example, a couple of days ago. And, whether you're a liberal or a progressive or from the States or in Canada, I think the rallying cry is this notion of building back better, right? And so here's our opportunity to take what was wrong in the past and address that and move towards a future where we are actually not just tinkering around the edges of policy or tinkering around the edges of what works in our, unequal society, and et cetera, but to really transform it. And I think you need to have a way of thinking. You need to be able to be open to understanding different points of view and then synthesizing that into workable solutions, and to work in very difficult, constrained contexts, but still make something out of it. All of that is what you learn in art school, in art and design school. So it's that particular practice of being able to take complex contexts or complex problems and not reducing them to a simplistic level, but really fully understanding it, unpacking it, and then figuring out a solution with others. So the other part is the collaborative nature of what's required for future transformation.
Do you think that the students at OCAD perhaps have a competitive edge during this time because they are so creative? And that's something that I know we've been trying to bring to the traditional business world for years, is this sense of creativity.
Absolutely. And in fact, I was speaking with someone recently, I think it was Pedro Barata, who runs Future Skills Challenge. And he had mentioned that, they had surveyed a number of CEOs, and the top two skills that are needed is communication skills and collaboration skills. And so, communication skills is really skills of expression. Can I relay my message in a variety of styles? Can I relay meaning in a variety of ways and using different media? How can I package things? So all of that is obviously all about expression and art and design. And then collaboration is also critical because as we move into sort of the digital arts, for example, it's very rare that you have a singular digital artist doing everything themselves, right? So it's about taking different disciplines, people from different domains, whether that's coding, graphic design, writing, even commercialization skills, right? And then putting all those folks together to come up with how you're going to actually develop that experience or product.
What advice do you have for people who are watching right now in terms of the future of learning? If there's one thing that you want to share today, what would that be?
Well, the future of learning is not going to be a bunch of people sitting in front of the video doing their lecture. So if you think that learning is just taking, and Amber, you and I know this, right? Which is, people assume that the moment you move into a digitized sort of environment, that all you do is you take the previous expression of the medium, whether that's like TV, you take TV and then you stick it into the web, or you take theater and you stick it into film, or you take, et cetera. Similarly with education, it's not just taking the classroom view and then you just videotape it. We know that that's not what the future of education is going to be. So it's really about what are the things that work. What's really great about this time is it's a massive experiment. We're learning how people interact. Let's take Zoom or Microsoft Teams. We're learning how people interact in Teams and Zoom. And we know so questions like, how do I get the entire student body to participate? Why is it that always the person in the left-hand bottom screen never talks or never opens up her video? Or that's funny. I always see the same people every time I open up my Zoom room. And so there are certain things, affordances in the medium that are technically designed, actually. So I just found out recently that some of these platforms know who is the most active. So they typically bump up those videos first. Yep. And so obviously you don't want to take that into a learning context, because the learning context, you want to create opportunities for participation and to equalize those opportunities for participation as much as possible. So this is our time as educators, actually, to play around with these technologies and then to critique them and to say, this isn't working. This is not the way this tech should be built. So we should be advocating for building tools that actually help us and using those tools in the way that they ought to be used in the best in the context of the overall learning experience, but not assuming that it's the tool that is the learning experience. So it's I think really about ensuring that we see this time as a time for experimentation so that we could advocate for how we ought to use technology better as an enabling technology for certain parts of the learning experience. But we also know that ultimately the face-to-face part, the community part, is still the most important.